Sawadee-ka. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're studying the words of the Buddha. We're in volume 6, which is titled The Natural Law of Kamma. We just started this book last week, and we're in chapters 11 through 20 today. We're going to be exploring some teachings of the Buddha on this natural law of Kamma. Now, even though this book is, really a collection of teachings based in the natural law of Kamma and helping you to learn specific things related to the natural law of Kamma, we could really say that all the teachings of the Buddha in one way or another are related to this natural law. And this is what you're awakening to, or this is what you're cultivating wisdom about, is this natural law. This is what you need in order to be able to navigate your way to enlightenment. So I'd like to welcome all of you, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly. The way that we do this program is I invite students who are in Zoom to be able to read a chapter from our book. And then after a student reads a chapter, I'll share some teachings on that. Then I'm going to open up to any and all questions that you have. If you're in Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, and you'd like to ask questions, you can put that in the comment section. Or in Zoom, you can electronically raise your hand, unmute your microphone, and ask questions that way. And you can also volunteer to read that way too. So let me know if there's anyone in Zoom who would like to volunteer to read this first chapter. Okay, looks like Pat. Go ahead, sir.
To do an action, Rahula, when you intend to do an action with the body, you should reflect upon that same bodily action thus. Would this action that I intend to do with the body lead to my own harm or to the harm of others, or to the harm of both? Is it an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, with painful results? When you reflect, if you know this action that I intend to do with the body would lead to my own harm or to the harm of others or to the harm of both, it is an unwholesome bodily action with painful consequences, with painful results. Then you definitely should not do such an action with the body. But when you reflect, if you know this action that I intend to do with the body would not lead to my own harm or to the harm of others or to the harm of both, it is a wholesome bodily action with wholesome consequences, with wholesome results. Then you may do such an action with the body. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Pat. So here the Buddha is teaching his son Rahula, and we have a whole series of 3 different discourses where the Buddha is teaching specific topic related to essentially reflecting as either you're getting ready to do an action, while you're doing an action, and after you've done an action. This is what's going to help you to be able to cultivate your wisdom and restrain your mind from doing something that's unwise. Because by the time you get to enlightenment, you're going to be making 100% wise decisions in all situations. You're not going to be making any unwise decisions. You're not going to be causing any harm to other beings whatsoever. Now, as you guys know, you can't cause someone else to be discontent. And just like people can't cause you to be discontent, it's your own mind that's causing that. You can't cause others to be discontent, but you can cause them harm. Causing someone harm is to cause harm to their physical body, their material possessions, or their reputation. And if you cause harm to someone, this is going to produce harm, and now harm is going to come back to you. So what the Buddha is guiding you to do here is that before you do any type of action, that you reflect and try to determine, is this going to cause harm to myself, to others, or to both? And if it's going to cause harm to either yourself, to others, or both, the Buddha is teaching you to restrain your mind from doing that. Don't essentially go forward with that particular bodily action. And now, why the Buddha is talking about bodily actions here, remember, he talks about 3 specific actions. He talks about bodily actions, verbal actions, and mental actions. So even though he's talking about bodily actions here, you can apply the same teaching to these other types of actions too. That not only is it wise to reflect before you take a bodily action, but you would be wise to reflect before you have a verbal action like speech or interacting through any kind of communication like text or chat or social media posts and things like that. And then mental actions too, anything that's going on in the mind. So for example, if you're having the thought of, oh my gosh, I don't have a car. I think I'm going to steal somebody's car, right? And this is the thought that comes to the mind. You would like to reflect on that and say, hold on a second, is this going to cause harm to myself, to others, or both? This is going to cause harm to that family because they're not going to be able to go to work. They're not going to be able to go to the store and acquire basic necessities to sustain their life. If they have children, they're not going to be able to take their children to school. This is going to cause harm. And now when you see that that's unwholesome and it's going to cause harm, that it's going to produce unwholesome results for you. It's going to produce painful consequences here. This is unwholesome Kamma, or painful results. But when you reflect and you're like, I think I'd like to help my neighbor, take out their trash because I know that they're away on vacation and I see that maybe they left their trash on their front porch and this is going to attract animals. And, it'd be really great if their trash was taken care of. And you reflect on this, like, am I going to be causing harm to someone's physical body, their material possessions, or their reputation? No, there's no harm here. So, you might decide to go forward and do that particular bodily action. That's a wholesome action, and it's going to have wholesome results because you're practicing generosity. So this is the Buddha teaching you to reflect on something before you do it, because if you have wisdom, you can stop yourself from doing something that would be unwholesome. And now you'll be able to incur the wholesome results of having not done something unwholesome, right? So do you guys have questions on this particular chapter? Because we've got 2 more here that are very similar in nature. Let me know if you have questions by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. Is there someone who would like to read this next chapter, chapter 12? Okay, Samantha.
While doing an action. Also, Rahula, while you are doing an action with the body, you should reflect upon that same bodily action thus. Does this action that I am doing with the body lead to my own harm, or to the harm of others, or to the harm of both? Is it an unwholesome bodily action with unwholesome consequences, with unwholesome results? When you reflect, if you know, this action that I am doing with the body leads to my own harm, or to the harm of others, or to the harm of both, it is an unwholesome bodily action with unwholesome consequences, with unwholesome results. Then you should suspend such a bodily action. But when you reflect, if you know, this action that I'm doing with the body does not lead to my own harm, or to the harm of others, or to the harm of both, it is a wholesome bodily action with wholesome consequences, with wholesome results. Then you may continue with such a bodily action.
All right. Thank you, Samantha. So this is while you're actually in the act of doing something. So you're like mid, doing this thing, whether it's a bodily action, your verbal action, maybe you're speaking and you're halfway through your sentence and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm gossiping and slandering here. I'm not interested in doing that. And now what the Buddha is saying is refrain from doing that, right? Stop yourself from doing that. Because if you continue on with whatever that action is, whether it's bodily, verbal, or mental, it's going to produce unwholesome results for you. So while he's focusing on bodily actions, like I mentioned, you can relate this to the verbal actions and mental actions as well. So you'd like to stop yourself while you're actually in the process of doing that thing, no longer allowing yourself to continue to do it, because it's just going to produce harm to yourself, to others, or both. And now you're going to need to deal with the unwholesome consequences of that. So the more of that you do, the more unwholesome you're going to experience coming back to you. So if you can catch yourself midstream, like in the middle, this is, at least going to save you from a certain portion of this unwholesome Kamma that you would have generated. So cutting it off in the middle would be really wise if that's where you catch it. Obviously, you'd like to catch it beforehand. That's why the Buddha taught that first. But if you didn't catch it there, now catch it while you're in the process of doing something that's unwise. But then if you're in the process of doing something that is wholesome and you realize like, wow, this is really wholesome here, no need to stop that. You can continue to go forward because you're not causing harm to yourself, to others, or to both. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. Okay, no questions here. So now this is the 3rd chapter that connects to all of these. Would someone like to read this one? Okay, go ahead, Pat.
Having done an action. Also, Rahula, after you have done an action with the body, you should reflect upon that same bodily action thus. Does this action that I have done with the body lead to my own harm, or to the harm of others, or to the harm of both? Was it an unwholesome bodily action with unwholesome consequences, with unwholesome results? When you reflect, if you know, this action that I have done with the body leads to my own harm, or to the harm of others, or to the harm of both, it was an unwholesome bodily action with unwholesome consequences, with unwholesome results. Then you should confess such a bodily action, reveal it, and lay it open to the teacher or to your wise companions in the holy life. Having confessed it, revealed it, and laid it open, you should undertake restraint for the future. But when you reflect, if you know this action that I have done with the body does not lead to my own harm, or to the harm of others, or to the harm of both, it was a wholesome bodily action with wholesome consequences, wholesome results. You can reside peaceful and joyful, training day and night in wholesome states. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Pat. So this is after the action is completed. The Buddha's saying that it would be wise for you to reflect here. This is what's going to help you to cultivate wisdom, that after you've actually done something, you can look at it and decide, was it wise or unwise based on the wisdom that you have? Because if you cause harm, again, that harm's going to come back to you. If you realize that what you've done is unwise and it's going to produce unwholesome results, what the Buddha is saying is that it would be helpful for you to go talk with a teacher, someone who you trust and have confidence in, or a member of the community who is wise about these teachings. And now when you lay it open to them, meaning that you expose what it is that happened, what this is going to do for you is help you to be able to gain some feedback and get some guidance of how to improve that for the future. Oftentimes, the mind's ego isn't interested in doing this. It doesn't want to admit to itself or to others that you've made some kind of misstep or some kind of mistake. So not only does it help you to get the guidance on that specific situation, but it'll actually help your ego to go into a situation where you can now say to a teacher, hey, look, I yelled at my life partner, or I hit my child, and I really would like to change this. Can you help me understand what I need to do? And things of this nature. Because if you're dealing with a teacher who is either enlightened or close to it, and you have confidence in this person, or you have a community of people who are very wise, they're going to keep that to themselves. It's not like they're going to go out and gossip and slander and, talk about those kinds of things. It's purely to be able to help you get the guidance that you need to be able to make wiser decisions in the future. Because if you keep making those same decisions over and over and over again, now that you've maybe went all the way through this situation and got all the way to the end, you're going to experience unwholesome Kamma. It doesn't matter, if you've done something unwise, you're going to experience the unwholesome results. But at least here at the very end, if you didn't catch it at some other time, you can at least cultivate the needed wisdom so that you don't repeat it in the future. You just keep this cycle going over and over and over again. So by laying it open and revealing it, you can actually cultivate the wisdom so that you don't actually do this in the future, and you can restrain your mind, right? This is what would be wise for you. But conversely, if you've done things that are wholesome and wise all throughout your day, and you know that you haven't caused any harm, this is where you can reside peaceful and joyful all day long. Have you ever done things throughout your day, maybe prior to getting on the path to enlightenment, maybe now too, where you've done things throughout your day and you've made some unwise decisions, and you lay your head down on the pillow and you're trying to go to sleep, but you're kind of invaded by your thoughts and thinking about the unwise decisions that you made all throughout your day. And now you have stress and anxiety or guilt and shame or fear about the things that you did throughout your day. Whereas if you know that what you've done is wholesome and wise, and you haven't made any unwise decisions and you haven't caused any harm, you can reside peaceful and joyful. You can easily doze off to sleep knowing that you didn't cause any harm to anyone. So the way that I think about these three discourses is it's like this wild bush, right? That you're cutting it back and cutting it back and cutting it back and cutting it back and cutting it back. And eventually you'll uproot it, and then your mind actually won't do these unwholesome things. So if you got all the way to the end like this, through a particular bodily action, verbal action, or mental action, you've gotten all the way to the end like this, and now you finally see you did something unwise. Now you go get help, Now you kind of clipped a little bit of the leaves on the bush, right? But if you're going through this situation and maybe halfway through while you're doing an action, you figured out that you're doing something unwise, you've kind of cut that bush back a little bit further, right? But now if you're reflecting prior to doing something and you actually see that it's unwise and you choose not to do it, then you've cut that bush back even further. And now eventually you'll get to the point where you uproot it completely out of the mind, and the mind would never even think about doing that particular thing ever. Like right now, when you probably go into a store, the idea of stealing something is the farthest thing from your mind. You have no interest in doing that whatsoever. That thought doesn't even come up in your mind like, oh, I should steal this thing, right? Because the root of that is out of your mind. Where maybe when we were children or we were younger, we would go into a store and maybe we thought about stealing something. And maybe we even took it as far as actually doing it, where we actually stole something. I know I did when I was growing up as a kid. I used to steal from stores and I experienced lots of unwholesome karma because of it, right? But slowly but surely, I had to cut that back and cut that back and cut that back. And now when you go into a store, there's no way you would even think about that the mind just doesn't think that way because it's been completely uprooted. So that's what the Buddha is giving you here is the tools of how to accomplish that reflect before, while doing something, and then afterwards. And the afterwards part is to cultivate the wisdom so that you don't actually do these types of things in the future. But you would like to catch this as soon as possible. So even if like an unwise thing is on the tip of your tongue and you haven't said it yet, you're not in the moment of actually doing it, it's just on the tip of your tongue and you're reflecting before you actually say it. And then you just realize, nope, I'm not going to say that. And you cut it off. That is wonderful because now you're not going to experience that significant unwholesome karma from having actually done it, right? So this is the Buddha giving you the tools of these 3 key times to be able to look at what it is that you're doing and what you're about to do and things of this nature so that now you can cultivate the needed wisdom and restrain the mind. So let me know what questions you guys have here. It looks like Samantha might have a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. I have some notes from the first time I took this class, and I'm not sure if I asked you the question and you gave me the answer or if I interpreted something you said. So I just wanted to clarify about quote unquote confessing. What I wrote is that it's not really confession. It means just asking for insight and instruction, and one should not feel guilty or shameful. Is that correct, or did I maybe misinterpret something you said last time?
No, I remember you asked that question, and because
I did. Okay.
The Catholicism in those of us that have practiced Catholic tradition, when we see the word confess, you're not going to be visiting me in a black box somewhere, and you're not going to get any. You're not going to get any Hail Marys for the things that we talk about.
We should not feel guilty or shameful.
It's not about whether you should or shouldn't feel guilty. It's that you would like to train your mind to not feel guilty because you could do something that's unwise. And if you do feel guilty, that means there's a craving in your mind, most likely a craving to be perfect. And now with the mind's craving for perfection, when you realize you've made a misstep, you could feel guilty and shameful. So it's not a matter of whether you should or shouldn't. It's that if there's craving present, you will feel guilty. So now get rid of that craving, but there's no need to feel guilty. Instead, what you would like to do is you would like to maintain your composure and realize, okay, that was unwise, and now figure out what's the best way to get some wisdom so that in the future you can make better decisions.
Okay. And if one did go to the point of actually harming, causing harm to someone or a harmful action, if you sincerely apologize to someone, does that change the unwholesome Kamma in any way? Or is it just something that's wise to do, to admit that you've been hurtful and to tell the other person that you're aware of that?
It will improve your Kamma, but it's not going to completely erase it just with an apology. Mm-hmm. So you're going to
Okay.
need to understand that even with the apology, which is wise because that's helpful for the mind's ego and it's helpful to do some cleaning up of your unwholesome karma, but you're still going to experience the unwholesome karma even with the apology.
Okay. Thank you, Teacher David.
Yep. But it's still wise to definitely apologize.
Okay.
All right. I don't see any other questions. So let's go to the next chapter. This is chapter 14. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, it looks like Samantha.
Do not be judgmental regarding people. The perfectly enlightened one said to the Venerable Ananda, by reason of the female household practitioner Magasala states disagreement to the fortunate one that her father Purana was celibate, living apart, abstaining from sexual intercourse, but her paternal uncle Isiddhata was not celibate, not abstaining from sexual intercourse, but lived a contented married life. When they died, the fortunate one declared, they attained to the state of the once returner and have been reborn in the Tasita group of heavenly beings. Judgmental people compare them, saying, this one has just the same qualities as the other, so why is one worse and one better? This will be for their lasting harm and suffering. In this case, the person who is sweet-natured and has listened, learned, comprehended theoretically, and found temporary freedom is better and finer than the other person. Why is that? Because the teaching stream carries him along. But who can know this difference except the Tathagata? Therefore, Ananda, do not be judgmental regarding people. Do not pass judgment on people. Those who pass judgment on people harm themselves. I alone, or one like me, may pass judgment on people.
All right. Thank you, Samantha. So what's happening here is this household practitioner is talking to the Buddha about one member of her family lived life in a certain way and practiced the teachings in a certain way, and another person in her family lived life and practiced the teachings in another way. And the Buddha was essentially understanding that they both obtained the second stage of enlightenment. But there were other people that were trying to judge these two people and decide, where they were going to be potentially reborn or what stage of enlightenment they were in. And what the Buddha essentially says is, hey, this judgment that you're doing, it's actually harming your own mind. It's just going to harm your own mind if you sit there and try to judge people, because who would know whether these people were in any one particular stage of enlightenment or where they're going to be reborn other than the Tathagata himself, the Buddha? Because the Buddha would know, based on his deep wisdom, he would be able to discern where somebody is in their development on the path to enlightenment. But these other people who are kind of measuring and comparing, this is their conceit. And now when your conceit comes out, this is going to affect your own mind. It's going to cause harm because you're going to look down on some people with ego and conceit, or you're going to look up to people with such awe and feel shaken up when you're around them. And now it's just causing harm to your own mind in these situations, because the people that you're talking down to, they're going to tend to push you away and be disinterested in associating with you. And the people who you put yourself under and you shaken up when you're around them, they're going to lack confidence in you. Like say it was your boss or something, and now you're going to have difficulties in your career because they're not going to have the confidence to give you that wonderful project that can improve your career because you're all shaken up. So if you put yourself above people, you're going to tend to put yourself below people. So the Buddha is saying that it's unwise to judge people. Ultimately, he says this down here, and I think that, this is probably just a mistranslation here. It says, I alone or one like me may pass judgment on people. What judgment is to measure and compare people, trying to determine what is wholesome for other people and what's not wholesome for other people. Well, a Buddha would be able to discern that type of information, but they're only going to share it with someone who has interest in learning their teachings. But what the Buddha is saying is he's not looking down on someone to think of himself as superior or inferior to them, but instead he has the ability to know what is wholesome or unwholesome for one person or another. He would have the ability to know what stage of enlightenment somebody is in and where they're going to be reborn, where nobody else would be able to have that ability. So this word judgment is being used here, but it's not the best word in terms of this last sentence. All these other sentences, it's wise. What the Buddha is saying is, therefore, Ananda, do not be judgmental regarding people. Yes, don't make yourself be superior, inferior. Don't look down on people or look up to people with such awe. Don't pass judgment on people. Yeah, that's wise. Those who pass judgment on people harm themselves. Absolutely. But then this last sentence here, the word judgment is still being used. It really should be, I alone or one like me may discern, where these people are going to be reborn, or, whether these people are into wholesome or unwholesome things. This word judgment doesn't really quite fit here, because remember, we're taking a language of Pali, which is no longer a spoken language, and we're bringing it into English. So there's kind of some words that aren't quite exactly what they need to be here. So that's very rare, but in this particular case, a Buddha, an enlightened being, isn't going to judge anybody. But a Buddha is going to be able to determine whether someone's in one stage of enlightenment or not. They're going to be able to determine where someone's going to be reborn. But that's not something they'll go around and actively share necessarily. So he's saying him or someone like him, meaning a Buddha, would be able to do this. But, this is not something that a Buddha is going to walk around and, profess and share and things like this. So let me know what questions you guys have here, where the Buddha is helping you to be able to see, to get rid of that conceit and don't be judgmental of anybody at all, because that's only going to harm your own mind. Okay, I don't see any questions. So now we'll go to chapter 15 here. This looks like Pat would like to read this one. Looks like the Samantha and Pat show here. All right.
Discontentedness is dependently arisen. On one occasion, Nanda, I was residing right here in Rajagaha in the bamboo grove, the squirrel sanctuary. Then, in the morning, I dressed and taking bowl and robe, I entered Rajagaha for alms food. Then it occurred to me, it is still too early to walk for alms food in Rajagaha. Let me go to the park of the wanderers of other communities. Then I went to the park of the wanderers of other communities. I exchanged greetings with those wanderers, and when we had concluded our greetings and cordial talk, I sat down to one side. The wanderers then said to me as I was sitting to one side, "Friends, some ascetics and Brahmins, proponents of Kamma, maintain that discontentedness is created by oneself. Some ascetics and Brahmins, proponents of Kamma, maintain that discontentedness is created by another. Some ascetics and Brahmins, proponents of Kamma, maintain that discontentedness is created both by oneself and by another. Some ascetics and Brahmins, proponents of Kamma, maintain that discontentedness has arisen randomly, being created neither by oneself nor by another. Now, what does the ascetic Gotama say about this? What does he teach? How should we answer if we are to state what has been said by the ascetic Gotama and not misrepresent him with what is contrary to the truth? And how should we explain in accordance with the teachings so that no reasonable consequence of our assertion would give ground for criticism? I have said, Ananda, that discontentedness is dependently arisen. Dependent on what? Dependent on contact. If one were to speak thus, one would be stating what has been said by me and would not misrepresent me with what is contrary. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Pat. So as we know, discontentedness is caused by craving, desire, attachment, the mind's longing, yearning. If there's craving in the mind, then there's going to be discontentedness. That's the cause. And then it goes all the way back to ignorance, or the unknowing of true reality, the lack of wisdom. You learn that through dependent origination. But in order for discontentedness to arise, there needs to be contact through the six sense bases. There needs to be contact through the eyes, ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, or the mind itself. Remember, contact is made up of three things. There needs to be the internal sense base, the external sense base, and then there needs to be the awareness of that, the consciousness. So the internal sense base is the actual eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind. The external sense space is whatever those things are perceiving. So, for example, with the eye, that's the internal sense space. The external sense space is forms. Then with the ear, the external sense space is sounds. With the nose, it's odors. With the tongue, it's flavors. With the body, it's physical objects. And with the mind, it's mental objects. So when you have the internal sense space and the external sense space, those two things come in contact with each other. Now the mind becomes aware of that. The Buddha refers to that as eye consciousness or ear consciousness, nose consciousness, tongue consciousness, body consciousness, or mind consciousness. So now when the mind is aware that it's been contacted, if there's a craving in the mind, now there's going to be discontentedness. So in order for discontentedness to arise, there needs to be contact. This is why if you're in a conversation, no matter what kind of conversation it is, whether you're listening or whether you're participating, and you're noticing anger and frustration arising, of course, you'd like to cut it off. That's what you're being trained to do and learning to do, is internally in your mind to cut it off. But if your mind's unable to do that, you can break contact. You can walk away. That's going to eliminate the contact. So now your craving, desire, attachment isn't getting triggered. Over time, with consistent development of breathing, mindfulness, meditation, generosity, and actively cutting off and letting go in the moment, that craving, desire, attachment won't be there, and you can experience any kind of contact through the six sense spaces, and there's no discontentedness whatsoever. But as long as there's a craving, desire, attachment in the mind, as long as that's there, there's going to be discontentedness when you have contact and your mind sees it as either agreeable or disagreeable. So that's why you'd like to break contact in order to be able to train your mind to let go of a particular craving. This will really help you. And this is why the Buddha is teaching this, so that you can understand that level of detail. So for example, if you go into a flower shop and you're like, oh my gosh, and you notice the pleasant feeling starting to come up, maybe what you decide to do, if you can't cut that off, is you just walk out and leave, right? Or if you are walking down the street and you smell a sewer and you notice that your mind's having this repulsion, right? In that situation, if you really can't control your mind and you're not interested in, being able to train it further in that moment, and you just need to keep on walking, just keep on walking so that now you don't experience that contact through the nose. But ultimately, what you would like to do is stand there at the sewer and breathe it all in and train your mind that, look at that odor. Boy, does that smell. And now your mind can stay calm even though you're smelling that odor. I don't know if some of you guys remember, I was explaining in a class at one time where I used to live near Washington, D.C. I used to live in Washington, D.C. at one point. But for those of you guys that are familiar with Washington, D.C., when you take this one road into Washington, D.C., there's a sewage plant right there. And probably a good mile before you get there, you know that you're coming to the sewage plant. And then while you're passing the sewage plant, which is probably another half a mile, you're going to be smelling it really strong. And then when you're past it for another mile, you're going to be smelling it really strong. And I knew this, and I would experience somewhat of discontentedness as I would go through this area. So what I did one time is I drove my car to the sewage plant, parked there, got out of the car, and breathed it all in. And I stayed there for a while until my mind was just like, okay, this is just an odor, right? So this is what you would like to do, which you guys learned in the previous classes, where if there's something that you're getting pleasant feelings from, you're going to need to distance yourself from that, train your mind to let it go, breaking contact. If there's something that is experiencing painful feelings or neither painful nor pleasant, you're going to need to bring that into your life and now train your mind to be desensitized to that particular thing. But depending on where you are in your training, you might be very early on and you might not even realize that you have this particular craving. And you notice, oh my gosh, here comes some discontentedness, and I'm in a business meeting and I don't want to pop in front of all these 10, 12, 15 people. Let me just excuse myself and go to the bathroom. Let me break contact so that I don't hear this particular thing that's happening right now. and this will protect your mind. The Buddha refers to this as guarding the doorways to discontentedness, that you would like to guard these doors because you're experiencing contact through these six sense spaces and you need to guard that. So where that comes from is understanding that contact is the cause and condition that is going to trigger your cravings, desires, attachments. So discontentedness is dependent on contact. Without contact through one of the six sense spaces and there being a craving in the mind, you wouldn't experience discontentedness. So in some situations, even though later you might need to expose your mind to that particular thing in order to eliminate the painful feelings and the craving that's producing it, maybe in this particular situation, it's better for you to just eliminate contact and move on. And now you'll come back to that thing in the future when you're ready to take care of that particular craving. So let me know what questions you guys have here where you're learning about how discontentedness is dependent on contact. Okay, I don't see any questions. So now we'll go to the next one. This is chapter 16. Who would like to read this one? Okay, Marcy. Go ahead, ma'am. I don't hear you yet, Marcy. Sounds like, well, I don't hear anything. It seems like your mic must not be working. Is there someone else who would like to read, perhaps, while Marcy works on her audio, and then she can maybe read next time? Okay, Vipav. Marcy, if you'd like to work on that, then maybe next time you'll be ready to read.
Oh, thank you, Teacher David.
Mm-hmm.
Walking the middle way, two extremes that should not be followed. Monks, these two extremes should not be followed by one who has gone forth into homelessness. What two? The pursuit of sensual happiness, insensual pleasures, which is low, vulgar, the way of the worldlings, not honorable, unbeneficial, and the pursuit of self-mortification, which is painful, not honorable, unbeneficial. Without veering towards either of these extremes, the Tathagata has advocated to the middle way, which gives rise to vision, which gives rise to wisdom, which leads to peace, to direct knowledge, experience, to enlightenment, to nibbana. And what monks is that middle way awakened by the Tathagata, which gives rise to vision, which leads to nibbana, enlightenment. It is this noble eightfold path, that is right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Vibhav. So this middle way, you can see the Buddha's talking about the Eightfold Path. That's the middle way. But your mind's going to have a tendency to go to one side or the other and even swing back and forth. That's what it does in the unenlightened state. Even with these teachings, I'll give you an example. There was a student who contacted me recently who learned about washing feet and how that eliminates conceit out of the mind. And this student was asking me, should I do this like every week or, every 2 or 3 days, or should I just avoid doing this altogether? Right. So this was like doing it so often or not at all. These are like the two extremes, where my answer to them was, doing it once every 3 to 12 months is probably really all your mind needs. That's the middle way. So every single thing that you're doing in life is going to need to be done in the middle way. If you do it in these extremes, then your mind's not going to experience the peace and joy. Whether it's maintaining your home, if you are obsessively trying to maintain every little aspect of your home and trying to, tidy up every little tiny piece of your home, that's not going to lead to peace and joy. But if you're on the other side where you could care less about your home and you weren't really paying attention to its maintenance and upkeep, you're not going to experience peace and joy there either. So you've got to come to the middle. So the Buddha here is talking about this pursuit of sensual pleasure and sensual happiness. And he's talking about this self-mortification, which is what was going on during his lifetime, like hanging himself upside down from trees, laying on beds of nails, starving himself, all these kinds of things. They thought that if you could overcome that pain to the physical body, that you could get to enlightenment. So the Buddha experienced these two extremes, where when he was in the palace, he had all this sensual pleasures, everything and anything that you could imagine that was available to him, he had that available to him. And then when he left, he swung all the way to the other side. But it was ultimately when he came to the middle that he realized that's where the peace and the joy is. So you're going to need to do this with each individual aspect of your practice, and using the Eightfold Path as a guide, training your mind through that. But then on a day-to-day basis, moment by moment basis, if your mind is not peaceful, if it's not joyful, if you're experiencing stress and anxiety, if your mind's uptight and apprehensive or things like this, it's just because it's not in the middle. No matter what it is, whether it's your maintenance of your home, your relationships with your family, maybe your job or occupation, any number of things. If your mind is not peaceful about that particular thing, it's because it's not in the middle. And you've got to find that middle and navigate that and be able to stay there. And it's the Eightfold Path that's going to help you to be able to do that. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. Okay, I don't see any questions. So it looks like Marcy's back. She either has a question or she'd like to read. Let's see. I see your lips moving, but no sound. There's a setting, Marcy, in the Zoom. If you go to the settings, and it'll let you do like an audio test, and you should be able to test your microphone that way.
Hello, hello, hello,
There
hello,
we
hello,
go.
hello.
We got you.
All right. Maybe it just needed me to test it.
Yep. Some impermanence.
Yeah, a little impermanence. Whenever you would like me to read next, Teacher David, I'll be more than willing to read.
Okay, this is a chapter that you can read here, chapter 17.
Okay. Past unwholesome actions cannot be exhausted with the performance of piercing atrocities. Am I saying that right?
I think the way I pronounce it is austerities.
Austerities. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense. Austerities. Harshness. Now, man nahamana. On one occasion, I was living in Rajagaha on the mountain Vulture Peak. On that occasion, a number of Nagagathas living in the black rocks on the slopes of the Isagili were practicing continuous standing, rejecting seating, and were experiencing painful, agonizing, piercing feelings due to effort. Then, when it was evening, I rose from meditation and went to the Nagathas there. I asked them, friends, why do you practice continuous standing, rejecting seats, and experiencing painful, agonizing, piercing feelings due to effort? When this was said, they replied, friend, the Nagatha Natuputas is omniscient and all-knowing and claims to have complete wisdom and vision thus. Whether I am walking or standing or asleep or awake, wisdom and vision are continuously and uninterruptedly present to me. He says thus, Nagagathas, you have done unwholesome actions in the past, exhausted them with the performance of piercing, austerities. And when you are here and now restrained in body, speech, and mind, that is doing no unwholesome actions for the future. So by obliterating them with asceticism, past actions, and by doing no fresh actions, there will be no consequences in the future. With no consequences in the future, there is the destruction of action. With the destruction of action, there is destruction of discontentedness. With the destruction of discontentedness, there is destruction of feeling. With the destruction of feeling, all discontentedness will be exhausted. This is the doctrine we approve of and accept, and we are satisfied with it. When this was said, I told them, but friends, do you know that you existed in the past and that it is not the case that you do not exist? No, friend. But friends, do you know that you did unwholesome actions in the past and did not abstain from them? No, friend. But friends, do you know that you did such and such unwholesome actions? No, friend. But friends, do you know that so much discontentedness has already been exhausted, or that so much discontentedness still has to be exhausted, or that when so much discontentedness has been exhausted, all discontentedness will have been exhausted? No, friend. But friends, do you know what the abandoning of unwholesome states is and what the cultivation of wholesome states is here and now? No, friend. So, friends, it seems that you do not know that you existed in the past and that it is not the case that you did not exist, or that you did unwholesome actions in the past and did not abstain from them, or that you did such and such unwholesome actions, or that so much discontentedness has already been exhausted, or that so much discontentedness has still to be exhausted, or that when so much discontentedness has been exhausted, all discontentedness will have been exhausted, or what the abandoning of unwholesome states is and what the cultivation of wholesome states is here and now. That being so, those who are murderers, bloody-handed, evildoers in the world, when they are reborn among human beings, go forth into homelessness as Nagathas. Thank you, Teacher David.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So this is the Buddha speaking with people who aren't understanding the natural law of Kamma, and they think that the way that they're going to extinguish all their unwholesome Kamma from the past is to cause pain to the body, is that they're standing there rejecting seats, experiencing painful, agonizing, piercing feelings due to their effort, right? So they're not understanding the natural law of Kamma of cause and effect, that you can't extinguish your unwholesome Kamma by just causing physical pain to the body. So that's why the Buddha asked them these questions to see if they understood what they were needing to understand. And they didn't understand any of these things. So they would never be able to actually get to enlightenment without an understanding of the natural law of Kamma. So that's why he says, okay, well, when people are murderers, bloody-handed evildoers in the world, when they are reborn among humans, they go forth into homelessness with these people that are standing there in this piercing agony, right? And they're, even though they're in the human realm, they're experiencing all these pain of just standing there almost like they're in hell, but they're in the human world. This is because of their past actions as murderers or bloody-handed and evildoers in the world. This is their way of experiencing the painful experiences that they inflicted on other people in the past. So it's kind of like being in hell, but you're actually in the human realm. So what you're learning is you're learning that the way that you extinguish unwholesome Kamma is by the cultivation of wisdom first. And now by cultivating wisdom, whenever your old unwholesome Kamma is coming back to you, you need to make new decisions that is producing wholesome Kamma. And that's how you're going to get to the extinguishing of your old unwholesome Kamma. So for example, in the past, if I lied on my tax forms and I'm getting a notice in the mail 3 years later that says that, you owe us $1,000 for the amount that you initially owed us 3 years ago, you owe us $1,000 interest and $1,000 penalty, you're not going to extinguish that by just standing up and doing harsh things to the body. That's not the way that you're going to extinguish that old unwholesome Kamma coming back to you. Instead, in the present moment, you need to make wise decisions to call up the government, write them a letter, try to figure out how to extinguish this debt. Just standing there and not doing any new actions while causing harm to the body in the present moment, that's not going to extinguish your old unwholesome Kamma. But there's plenty of people in the past and even now that think this is the case, that the way that you actually get to the point of the extinguishing of your unwholesome Kamma is to do these kinds of things. But you're learning the truth, and you'll see that truth is working because you'll experience less and less unwholesome Kamma because you're producing more and more new wholesome Kamma, that your unwholesome Kamma is getting extinguished. So now your life is just going to get better and better and better because you just keep experiencing all this wholesome Kamma. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So now we'll go to the next one. This is chapter 18. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Yeah, this is the really long one. Yang, this is a really long chapter. If you need help, just let us know at any point.
Okay. Thank you, Teacher David. Pleasure and discontentedness not only caused by what was done in the past. Again, monks, I said to the Nigantas, What do you think, friend Nigantas? When there is intense effort, intense striving, do you then feel painful, agonizing, piercing feelings due to intense effort? But when there is no intense effort, no intense striving, do you then not feel any painful, agonizing, piercing feelings due to intense effort? When there is intense effort, friend Gotama, intense striving, then we feel painful, agonizing, piercing feelings due to the intense effort. But when there is no intense effort, no intense striving, then we do not feel any painful, agonizing, piercing feelings due to the intense effort. So it seems, friend Nigantas, that when there is intense effort, you feel painful, agonizing, piercing feelings due to the intense effort. But when there is no intense effort, you do not feel any painful, agonizing, piercing feelings due to intense effort. That being so, it is not fitting for the vulnerable Nigantas to declare whatever this person feels, whether pleasure or pain, or neither pain nor pleasure, all that is caused by what was done in the past. So by obliterating them with asceticism, past actions, and by doing no fresh actions, there will be no consequence in the future. With no consequence, all discontentedness will be exhausted. If, friend Nigatas, when there was intense effort, intense striving, then painful, agonizing, piercing feelings due to intense effort were present. And when there was no intense effort, no intense striving, then painful, agonizing, piercing feelings due to intense effort were still present. That being so, it would be fitting for the venerable Nigantas to declare, whatever this person feels, all discontentedness will be exhausted. But since, friend Nigantas, when there is intense effort, intense striving, then you feel painful, agonizing, piercing feelings due to intense effort. But when there is no intense effort, no intense striving, then you do not feel painful, agonizing, piercing feelings due to intense effort. You are therefore feeling only the painful, agonizing, piercing feelings of your self-imposed effort, and it is through ignorance, unknowing, and delusion that you mistakenly hold. Whatever this person feels, all discontentedness will be exhausted. Speaking thus, monks, I do not see any legitimate defense of their position by the Nigantas. Again, monks, I said to the Nigantas, what do you think, friend Nigantas? Is it possible that an action whose result is to be experienced here and now can, through effort and striving, become one whose result is to be experienced in the next life? No, friend. But is it possible that an action whose result is to be experienced in the next life can, through effort and striving, become one whose result is to be experienced here and now? No, friend. What do you think, friend Nigantas? Is it possible that an action whose result is to be experienced as pleasant can, through effort and striving, become one whose result is to be experienced as painful? No, friend. But is it possible that an action whose result is to be experienced as painful can, through effort and striving, become one whose result is to be experienced as pleasant? No, friend. What do you think, friend Nigantas? Is it possible that an action whose result is to be experienced in a matured personality can, by effort and striving, become one whose result is to be experienced in an unmatured personality? No, friend. But is it possible that an action whose result is to be experienced in an unmatured personality can, by effort and striving, become one whose result is to be experienced in a matured personality? No, friend. What do you think, friend Nigantas? Is it possible that an action whose result is to be much experienced can, through effort and striving, become one whose result is to be little experienced? No, friend. But is it possible that an action whose result is to be little experienced can, through effort and striving, become one whose result is to be much experienced? No, friend. What do you think, friend Nigantas? Is it possible that an action whose result is to be experienced can, through effort and striving, become one whose result is not to be experienced? No, friend. But is it possible that an action whose result is not to be experienced can, through effort and striving, become one whose result is to be experienced? No, friend. So it seems, friend Nigantas, that it's impossible that an action whose result is to be experienced here and now can, through effort and striving, become one whose result is to be experienced in the next life, and impossible that an action whose result is to be experienced in the next life can, through effort and striving, become one whose result is to be experienced here and now. Impossible that an action whose result is to be experienced as unpleasant can, through effort and striving, become one whose result is to be experienced and painful, and impossible that an action whose result is to be experienced as painful can, through effort and striving, become one whose result is to be experienced as pleasant. Impossible that an action whose result is to be experienced in a matured personality can, by effort and striving, become one whose result is to be experienced in an unmatured personality, and impossible that an action whose result is to be experienced in an unmatured personality can, through effort and striving, become one whose result is to be experienced in a matured personality. Impossible that an action whose result is to be much experienced can, through effort and striving, become one whose result is to be little experienced, and impossible that an action whose result is to be little experienced can, through effort and striving, become one whose result is to be much experienced. Impossible that an action whose result is to be experienced can, through effort and striving, become one whose result is not to be experienced, and impossible that an action whose result is not to be experienced can, through effort and striving, become one whose result is to be experienced. That being so, the Venerable Niganta's effort is fruitless. Their striving is fruitless. So speak the Niganta's monks, and because the Nigantas speak thus, these 10 legitimate deductions from their assertions provide grounds for advising them. Thus, their effort is fruitless, their striving is fruitless. And how is effort fruitful, monks? How is striving fruitful? Here, monks, a monk is not overwhelmed by discontentedness and does not overwhelm himself with discontentedness. And he does not give up the pleasure and accords with the teachings. Yet he is not obsessed with that pleasure. He knows thus, when I strive with determination, this particular source of discontentedness fades away in me because of that determined striving. And when I look on with equanimity, this particular source of discontentedness fades away in me while I develop equanimity. He strives with determination in regard to that particular source of discontentedness which fades away in him because of that determined striving, and he develops equanimity in regard to that particular source of discontentedness which fades away in him while he is developing equanimity. When he strives with determination, such a source of discontentedness fades away in him because of that determined striving. Thus, that discontentedness is exhausted in him. When he looks on with equanimity, such a source of discontentedness fades away in him while he develops equanimity. Thus, that discontentedness is exhausted in him. Again, monks, a monk considers thus, while I live according to my pleasure, unwholesome states increase in me, and wholesome states diminish.
But when I exert myself in what is painful, unwholesome states diminish in me and wholesome states increase. What if I exert myself in what is painful? He exerts himself in what is painful. When he does so, unwholesome states diminish in him and wholesome states increase. At a later time, he does not exert himself in what is painful. Why is that? The purpose for which that monk exerted himself in what is painful has been achieved. That is why that at a later time he does not exert himself in what is painful. Thus, too, monks, the effort is fruitful, the striving is fruitful. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Yang. So this whole first part where he's going through and he's asking these folks all these questions, essentially what you can understand from this is what they're saying is you can't extinguish any unwholesome actions, any unwholesome karma can't be extinguished through this striving that they're doing, through this austerities, through this things that they're doing, like causing physical pain to the body. You can't extinguish your unwholesome karma that way. So the Buddha basically had them answer all these questions. And ultimately he says, okay, so that being so, what you guys are doing is fruitless. That means that it's not producing any benefit to just stand here and cause physical pain to the body because you're not able to extinguish any of your unwholesome karma through that. So this is how the lack of wisdom, that ignorance, that unknowing of true reality plagues the mind, is that you can go through and answer all these questions, but then yet you're still sitting there doing this particular action that the mind hasn't reflected to be able to see for itself, that just causing physical pain to the body isn't going to extinguish your unwholesome karma. So then ultimately the Buddha gets to what is fruitful. And what he's talking about here, by the time he gets down here, is what I was just talking about and what you guys have learned in previous classes, where when you're experiencing painful feelings, the Buddha is saying to expose your mind to that, right? That by exposing your mind to those painful things, that the unwholesome states will diminish and the wholesome states will increase. So while I live according to my pleasure, unwholesome states increase in me and wholesome states diminish. So that's why you would like to distance yourself from anything that you're getting conditioned pleasant feelings from. But when I exert myself in what is painful, unwholesome states diminish in me and wholesome states increase. So that's why anything that your mind has painful feelings about, like I use the example of durian fruit a lot because in the past I used to, not like durian fruit. So I had to include that into what I was doing. I had to eat durian fruit and train my mind to be able to eat durian fruit. And it was somewhat painful at first, right? So you expose your mind to this, and now the unwholesome states of craving are diminished and the wholesome states are increased in your mind. And then after you've done that for a period of time, you ultimately get to a point where you move beyond that. And that's why at a later time, he does not exert himself in what is painful because it's gone. It's no longer painful, right? That your mind's craving has been eliminated. So because you've achieved what it is that you need to achieve, the purpose for which you were doing that has been achieved. Now you don't need to exert yourself into that situation. We're not talking about physical pain here with the Buddhist teachings. With those other practices, they're doing physical pain. What we're talking about here is mental pain, right? That you would like to expose yourself to. Let's just say there's a certain music that you don't like. You're going to need to expose your mind to that. You're going to need to listen to that music and train your mind to be comfortable with that. If there's a certain odor that your mind doesn't like the one that I talked about, the waste management facility, I had to expose my mind to that. But then eventually you get to a point where your craving has been eliminated. You've achieved what it is you need to achieve. And now you don't need to expose your mind to it anymore. But whenever you come across that particular odor or that sound or whatever it is, your mind's not discontent. So that's what the Buddha is teaching you here, because this is what's fruitful, because now you can eliminate the underlying cause, which is the craving. And now you won't experience that discontentedness anymore. you've exhausted the craving, extinguished it, eliminated it. It's no longer subject to future arising. So therefore, your mind can be at ease. So let me know what questions you guys have here. It looks like Marcy has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Can you hear me, Teacher David?
Sure can.
Okay. So my question to you would be, so we talked about physical pain, we're talking about mental pain, but what about emotional pain? Like I know emotional pain comes from things that we're feeling, right? And those feelings come from some kind of craving, desire, attachment. So what I would say is like, I've been told by my dogs that he's probably got 2 to 6 months to live, right? So I've been doing that death meditation, kind of just looking at him, petting him, and then I expose the mind to where he's not going to be here. I go through the whole steps of waking up, finding him, passed, and I get emotional pain. Like I get in my throat, in my heart. So how I guess I'm aware that he's impermanent, and I'm aware that he's going to pass on to another realm, but that emotional pain is still there. And is it just my deep rooted attachment to just his presence? Because I'm not sad that he's going to pass and go on to a new realm. It's almost like this nostalgic type of reverence in the mind and then I get this real emotional because this dog's been with me for 17 years and he's been through all of my highs and my lows, and it's just so I'm starting to feel the emotional pain right now talking about it.
Yeah, so the emotional pain that you're talking about is the same thing as what I'm describing as mental pain, exactly the same thing. So what you're doing here is you're exposing your mind to the painful, which is to imagine that this dog has passed. And that's what you're choosing to do. You're doing exactly what the Buddha is teaching you here and what you've learned from me in the past. So it's the same exact thing. It's just that your craving, desire, attachment is being triggered, where intellectually, this being Marcy understands this dog is impermanent and it's not permanent in your life. You understand that intellectually, but the mind is still holding on. That's where you can see there's the body, there's the mind, and then the combination of these two things is the person. The person, Marcy, fully understands that this dog is impermanent, but the mind is still holding on and saying, we're going to hold on to this. And that's where the pain's coming from. So the person is putting the mind in the situation where it has to keep confronting the death of this being before it actually occurs, which is wise of you, because now there'll be less pain for you. And the mind is having to let go. And that's why it hurts. That's why it's painful, because the mind is still holding on. Even though the person understands intellectually that this being is impermanent, the mind hasn't cultivated enough wisdom and it hasn't let go of its craving to be able to experience peace and joy here yet. So you would be wise to keep doing contemplation of death or reflection of death all the way through. And that doesn't mean you won't experience any painful feelings when he dies, but it'll definitely be less. But you may actually experience a peaceful death too. That is possible, that not only with animals, but with human beings, you could do that too. You've got some time here, 2 to 6 months to maybe train the mind to let go, but don't be surprised if you do have some discontentedness. And now on the backside of that, eventually your mind will let go.
My other question to you is, so during these contemplations or reflection of death, like, there's a lot of crying. So am I to cut off that crying and let it go? Or should I allow the body to use crying as a way of processing it?
If you need to cry, then cry. You're not suppressing it. You're not repressing it. That's not what you're interested in doing. If you need to cry, then cry. Let it out. Have a good cry, right? You've had plenty of those before, right? But if you're able to cut it off, not suppress it or repress it, but if you're able to cut it off, then great, cut it off. But if you need to cry, let it go. Let it rip. Get it all out. Extinguish it.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Teacher David.
Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Okay, don't see any other questions anywhere. So now we'll go to this next one. This is chapter 19. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, Mr. Pat.
All that is caused by what was done in the past. Monks, there are these three sectarian tenets which, when questioned, interrogated, and cross-examined by the wise and taken to their conclusion, will remain stuck in a doctrine of inaction. What are the three? 1. There are monks, some ascetics and Brahmins, who hold such a doctrine and view as this: whatever this person experiences, whether pleasure, pain, or neither pain nor pleasure, all that is caused by what was done in the past. 2. There are other ascetics and Brahmins who hold such a doctrine and view as this: whatever this person experiences, whether pleasure, pain, or neither pain nor pleasure, all that is caused by God's creative activity. 3. And there are still other ascetics and Brahmins who hold such a doctrine and view as this: whatever this person experiences, whether pleasure, pain, or neither pleasure, pain, nor pleasure, all that occurs without a cause or condition. Monks, I approach those ascetics and Brahmins who hold such a doctrine and view as this: whatever this person experiences, whether pleasure, pain, or neither pain nor pleasure, all that is caused by past deeds. And I said to them, is it true that you, venerable ones, hold such a doctrine and view? When I ask them this, they affirm it. Then I say to them, in such a case, it is due to past deeds that you might destroy life, take what is not given, indulge in sexual activity, speak falsehood, produce argumentative speech, speak harshly, indulge in idle chatter, that you might be full of longing, have a mind of ill will, and hold wrong view. Those who fall back on past deeds as the essential truth have no interest to do what should be done and to avoid doing what should not be done, nor do they make an effort in this respect. Since they do not apprehend as true and valid anything that should be done or should not be done, they are muddle-minded. They do not guard the mind, and even the personal designation ascetic could not be legitimately applied to them. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Pat. So these are three things that people, quote unquote, believe, but it's not true. And it's complete opposite of the natural law of Kamma. The more you peer into the natural law of Kamma, you will see that everything that any particular being is experiencing is a result of their decisions. It's not about blame or fault. It's not about punishment and rewards. It's none of that kind of stuff. It's not good luck or bad luck, destiny or fate, why you're experiencing what you're experiencing. It's the decisions that you're making. That's what's producing whatever result that you're experiencing. And you need to be able to see that truth for yourself by asking yourself questions like, who chose for you to listen to this class right now? Who chose for the clothing that you're wearing or lack thereof? Who chose the hairstyle that you have? Who chose whether or not you ate breakfast this morning? Who chose the job or occupation that you have? Who chose the location where you're living? Who chose the friends that you spend time with? These are all choices that you're making that are leading to some particular result. But what some people think is that what they're experiencing on a day-to-day basis are caused by these things. That the pleasure, pain, and neither painful nor pleasure is caused by everything they've done in the past, meaning like past lives. And that you can't change anything about your life today because everything's already predetermined based on what you did in your previous lives. You'll talk to people like this, that they think that it's fruitless to do anything in this life to improve your life because everything's predetermined based on what you did in your last life. So basically you're stuck and you're locked in. Or you'll hear people say that what they experience is because of God, and God is the one who's controlling everything that they're experiencing. Or some people will say there is no cause and condition. It just happens. Maybe it's the universe that these things happen, right? There's no cause and condition for any of this stuff. It's just kind of random events that's happening, right? So if you subscribe to any of this type of thinking, then you're not seeing true reality of the natural law of Kamma, and you're stuck and you can never change anything about your life. So the Buddha actually asked these people who think this way, and they confirmed it. They said, yes, that's exactly what we think, that those things are true. And then he says, Is it because of those things that you destroy life, you take what is not given, you indulge in sexual activity, speak falsehoods, produce argumentative speech, speak harshly, indulge in idle chatter, that you're full of longing, that's craving, desire, attachment, that you have a mind of ill will, that's the anger, hatred, and ill will, and that you hold wrong view, that's the ignorance or the unknowing of true reality, that's the three poisons or the three unwholesome roots? Is it because of the things that you've done in the past that stuff is occurring now? Is it because of God that these things are occurring? Or is there no cause and condition that these things are occurring because of that? So now when the Buddha gets down here, he says those who fall back on this kind of stuff have no interest to do what should be done or to avoid doing what should not be done. And they don't make any effort in that respect, because in this particular situation, he's saying everything's based on the past. So basically, these people think they're stuck and they're locked in, so they don't make any effort to improve what it is that they're choosing to do on a day-to-day basis and make better decisions. And then he says, since they don't apprehend what is true and valid, being able to see the natural law of Kamma, and they're not actually doing what should be done or avoiding what should not be done, they're muddle-minded, meaning they're lacking concentration. They don't have focus and concentration and clarity in their mind, that they don't guard the mind. They don't have mindfulness to guard the mind of discontentedness. And then he goes further and he says the personal designation of aesthetic could not be legitimately applied to them. If you were an aesthetic during the lifetime of the Buddha, you were on the path to enlightenment. You had given up worldly life and now you're on the path to enlightenment. So what the Buddha is saying is that if you think that what you're experiencing on a day-to-day basis is from the past, or that it's from God, or that there are no causes and conditions that are producing this, you're not even on the path to enlightenment, because you're not doing the things that you need to do to cultivate the needed wisdom to understand this natural law of Kamma and now be able to make efforts to improve what it is you experience on a day-to-day basis. So that's why he's saying even the personal designation aesthetic could not be legitimately applied to them, meaning they're not even on the path to enlightenment. So let me know what questions you guys have here where the Buddha is calling out these three things that people think, and there's people nowadays that think this way too. So you might run across that, or maybe you even think this way. So you need to be able to peer into this and see the truth for yourself. Remember, you're not believing anything here. You've got to be able to independently verify that this is not the way that the world actually works. So let me know by putting that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I don't see any questions. So now we'll go to the very last one, which is just a continuation of this one, which hones in on this aspect of God. So we can read this one. Would someone like to read it? Okay, Marcy, go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, Teacher David. All is caused by God's creative action. Then, monks, I approach those ascetics and Brahmins who hold such a doctrine and view as this: whatever this person experiences, whether pleasure, pain, or neither pain nor pleasure, all that is caused by God's creative activity. And I said to them, is it true that you, venerable ones, hold such a doctrine and view? When I ask them this, they affirm it. Then I say to them, in such a case, is it due to God's creative activity that you might destroy life, take what is not given, indulge in sexual activity, speak falsehoods, produce argumentative speech, speak harshly, indulge in idle chatter, that you might be full of longing, have a mind of ill will, and hold wrong view? Those who fall back on God's creative activity as the essential truth have no interest to do what should be done and to avoid doing what should not be done, nor do they make an effort in this respect. Since they do not apprehend as truth and valid anything that should be done or should not be done, they are muddle-minded. They do not guard the mind, and even the personal designation aesthetic could not be legitimately applied to them. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Marcy. So it's taking that second paragraph of the three things that he's talking about, and he's just going into detail here. That if you think that it's because of God that you experience the things that you experience, you're not taking an effort to do what should be done or avoid doing what should not be done, and you're muddle-minded, your mind is not having a guard, and you're not even on the path to enlightenment, because it's not God that determines whether or not you're experiencing these certain things. It's your own decisions. If someone chooses to destroy life or take what is not given or any of these other things, it's your own decisions that are leading to that, not God. So the Buddha is helping you to be able to see this, because oftentimes people are taught that everything they experience is because of God. And if that's the case, then basically you're locked in. And what I think is really interesting about this teaching is people think that everything you're experiencing is because of God, but then when you die, God is going to judge you based on what you did and send you to a good place or a bad place. That sounds pretty contradictory if you ask me, because if everything we're experiencing is because of God, and now we're going to be judged at the end of our life to go to a good place or a bad place, wasn't it God who controlled us to do all those things and made us experience all those things, right? This is really not the way that the world works. And you can see how that's really much in conflict. So you can peer through this and see the truth for yourself, that what you experience on a day-to-day basis is coming from decisions you make. And the beauty in this is that if there's anything you don't particularly care for that goes on in your life, all you need to do is cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you'll experience different results. And now that's the beauty of this. But if we think that everything is because of God, now we don't cultivate wisdom. We don't make different decisions, and we don't experience different results. So if I was walking down the beach and wind is blowing in my face and I'm kicking up the sand and the sand's blowing in my face, and I'm like, wow, God is doing this. God is blowing all this sand in my face. Like, why is God doing this to me? Well, then you never cultivate the wisdom that it's your own decisions, that if you just stopped kicking up sand, it won't blow back in your face. And see, that's what we tend to do in the unenlightened state, is we go around the world and we put out a bunch of harmful conduct. And now when it blows back to us and we experience all this unwholesome results, we think it's something else. We think it's something like God, where in reality, it's our own decisions. So when we understand true reality, that it's our own decisions, now we can just cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and we experience different results. And life just gets better and better and better, because we start making wiser and wiser choices, because we're not interested in sand being blown back in our face. So this is one of the best ways to be able to cultivate wisdom, is look at what's coming back to you and figure out how you can make better decisions and improve that. And that's what's going to lead to improved results in your day-to-day life. So let me know what questions you guys have here. You can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So what I'll do is just end by thanking all of you guys for joining. Thank you for your interest to learn on the path to enlightenment. Next week, we're going to be in the next 10 chapters of this same book. So if you'd like to come to class, having already read, or maybe you read after class, either way, it's really helpful for you to read these books, because there's a lot more in the books than what it is that I teach in the classes. But next week, we're going to be in the next 10 chapters, which is chapters 21 through 30. Tomorrow in the group learning program, I'm going to be in volume 1, chapter 23, which is titled the Reminders Through Symbolism. This is where you learn about the symbolism of the teachings. And I'm going to be teaching that as part of our group learning program. We're kind of coming to an end there. On August 9th, we're going to be restarting the group learning program from the very beginning. So if you'd like to learn the group learning program, any of those topics, you can learn as I'm finishing up this one and restarting the next one. Or if you know people who are interested in starting on the path to enlightenment, August 9th is a great time for them to join. That's the very beginning of the program. So thank you all for joining, and perhaps I'll see you guys in a future class. Be well and take care. Sawadee krap. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.